and you need to break your whole startup down to that level and reinvent it so that when I'm hearing it, it should sound like the future. I want it to be so fantastical that the only way I could get my head around it is that I could say, well, I think the team can figure out what this guy just said to build it. That is what you should be going after in the AI world.
Welcome to the AI Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by the legendary Phillip Pipkins from Auteur VC. Super excited to have you in the studio with us today, Phillip.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
So there's so many questions to ask you, but I kind of want to get a little bit of context on your background, like what got you into this space. You know, you're a legend here in the Valley in Arizona as far as your fund and kind of what you've been doing in the space. But how did you get into all of this to begin with? Like, did you always think like someday I'm going to be in venture capital and this is my path? Or like, where was it? How did it start for you?
So it started, I'll start from the beginning. So I was born in the South. So my parents were in the military. I was born in the Air Force Base in Homestead, Florida. Grew up in Houma, Louisiana, which is the bayou.
Okay.
So down in the bayou until I was around like 10 or 11. And then from there, me and my mom moved to Arizona. And so then from there, I've been here ever since. So I'm 35, so however many years that is. My mom moved here because she had came here once on a military tour or something like that. And she loved the weather. In February.
Okay.
We landed in July, and my mom was really stubborn, and so we stayed.
Classic Arizona experience.
Yes. And then from there I went to ASU, which is largest school in America, local school here, and I actually got a film and literature degree.
Interesting. So your life path was, going to be more film production, kind of like.
Correct.
And then
I love this.
So the whole studio here, you're like, yeah, this is my jam.
This is my jam. Yes. I love this a lot. And having a English degree with film, basically, I was a screenwriter.
Okay.
So my whole goal was to go out to LA, write a screenplay, and win the award for original screenplay.
Okay.
That was my goal.
That was the goal.
But when you go out to LA, you just like if you go out to the Bay Area, you find out that everybody is trying to start up a startup. When you go out to LA, everyone is in Hollywood. So from there, I realized that two things. One, you don't make as much money in creative endeavors, and I really wanted to make money, so I decided, let me go do that first, and then I will revert back to this. And so I did what every creative person does, which is just morph into a marketer. Okay. So I started doing marketing, and one of the companies I was doing marketing at was a startup. Okay. And that is where I caught the bug. Okay. So this startup was at the time it was well funded. It was out of the Bay Area. It had an office in Palo Alto and had an office here in Phoenix. I applied for this position on Craigslist. Okay. Got it. And from there, he flew me out to Palo Alto, showing me around, this is how things work. And that's when I realized that Hollywood was nowhere near as large as technology. Okay. And he was doing a lot of IP law. Okay. And so in doing IP law, you actually get to see copyrights, patents, and trademarks. And you can kind of see who wears the pants in the world at that point. And so from there, was doing good. And they said, hey, come out to Palo Alto. I said, hey, could you pay me Palo Alto money? Yeah. And from there, we kind of severed ties. And so I networked my way into Silicon Valley Bank. So right next to the building that I was in was Silicon Valley Bank's building, overlooking the water and everything. The way I networked my way in there was...
I was going to ask because, I got to get the story on this.
Yeah, you got to get the scoop, right? So the real nitty gritty is that my mom's friend, she rows boats. Okay. And she's really good. My first boss at SVB, she rows boats too. Okay. So that's how they know each other. They were at the boathouse. My mom's friend Ray said, hey, or Nancy, who's going to be my first boss, she was asking if you know any young people looking for internship. Yeah. She said, I know this guy. I got the interview. And then in the interview, Nancy was basically like, look, you do not have the background to do this role, but I'm going to give you a chance based off of the network that you have. And that's where I realized that networking is far more important than your background or anything for that matter. And so I started very entry level at Silicon Valley Bank, which is still is, but back then definitely was the largest venture bank at the time.
Yeah.
And that's basically where I got my MBA.
Okay.
So I started entry level tech support, and I was there for around 9.5 years. I worked my way up to be, when I left, I was the vice president of the Southwest.
Okay. Wow.
So in between that, I was a product manager, a QA, quality software engineer, technical lead, everything under the sun. And that was great. Learned a ton. Startups were blowing up at the time. And from there, I kind of, I was getting a little antsy. I'm seeing all these startups raising rounds and everything. And so I said, this is around right before COVID started.
Okay.
I had made up my mind I was going to leave the bank and just go to a startup.
Okay.
And one of my other mentors, that's going to be like a theme throughout this, is this other people are like, don't do that, do this. And it was
really interesting. Decision. Okay.
So she said, I told her, I showed her a company that I was thinking about going to, and she was like, you shouldn't leave a bank to go make money. It was like, if you want to make money, you should just maneuver within the bank to get to the position that you need. And from there, she linked me up with the head of the market, and he called me. Dude he has a Texas accent, cool dude. He was like, hey, heard you want to make money. I was like, yeah. And so he maneuvered me to be the vice president of the Southwest, and then that's where I met my future partner of my debt fund, Ryan.
Okay.
As well, yeah. And then from there, basically, a la carte, the whole idea of that position was to bring on startups. Okay. And connect them to capital. Okay. And that's going to either be with the network of the VCs that we were also banking or with debt. Okay. And learned a ton doing that. And one of the things I learned was that when you're in Arizona, Mexico, and Nevada, there aren't as many high growth of venture-backed companies. Right. These are going to be bootstrapped or lightly capitalized companies. Mm-hmm. But the people that run them are very scrappy. They know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And if you've been bootstrapping all your life, then you will make sure that you pay back the loan. Right. And so I noticed that, hey, I think we could go downstream and lend to these folks. SVB was born off of not doing that. And so they're like, if you want to go do that, you should go do that. And so that's what I did. So with my partner, Ryan, we left the bank in 2022. So this is prior to...
Probably felt like good timing in retrospect.
It was great. Yeah. So when we left, the SVB was at the top of the hill. So when we're going out and raising money and telling people what we're doing, they're like, you guys left SVB? Yeah. I'm like, where did we sign up? Yeah. So that was great. And so then with the debt fund, and a debt fund is just like a VC fund that you raise money, and then instead of giving out equity, I give out debt. You got to pay it back. Okay. So you got to be a little bit more hard nosed, aka you're definitely looking for revenue generating companies, and you're going to be looking for ones that they have enough growth to be able to pay for the debt, the debt burden on top of it. So I was doing that for about 2 years. Great. But the whole time that I was doing the debt fund, the main reason was to learn how to do a fund in general. Okay. Because I really did want to do venture capital. Okay. At the end of the day. And as you know, the market definitely crashed. And so when VC is at its worst, that is the best time to deploy. Okay. But it's going to be the worst time to raise.
To raise, right, for sure.
So with that, I'm like, okay, if it's the best time to deploy and it's already hard to raise money anyways, this is my chance. This is when I need to go. And so I told my partner, and he already knew I was gung-ho about VC. And so he was like, all right, if you want to go do VC, then go do that. And so I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And he's like, all right, cool. And so I started up Auteur VC. And so Auteur, by the way, is just a call back to my film days. Okay. So in
Coming full circle on it.
Yeah. So an Auteur in film is a person like Quentin Tarantino or Steven Spielberg. It's someone whose films are so distinctive by their style that you could tell it was their film even without seeing their name in the credit. And so that means that they're so good at their craft that they're legendary at it, and they can do it multiple times. That's the type of startup founder that I'm looking for.
That's amazing. So how long have you been running a tour for now then?
So this has been around 7 or 8 months now.
Okay.
So I started at the latter half of last year, and so far been raising, been warehousing some deals. The plan is to hopefully close this thing out by the end of the summer.
Okay.
And then start deploying. And if not, then I'll just do a first close by the end of the summer and start deploying.
Super exciting. That's amazing. So something I'd be interested in is, obviously, as you're going through this whole process, you were in banking, you were in film, and you kept getting, I guess, drawn back to kind of like technology. What's been your big draw? Is it just kind of like it seems like a bigger industry, it needs a place to make money? Is it interest, or kind of like what brings you back to that?
I think it's all of them. So one, you definitely can make way more money in tech. Two, the characters that are in tech, they're interesting people. And I'm, at the end of the day, like, yes, I can look at your Excel sheet and look at your PowerPoint stuff, but there's a human business. It's a relationship-based business, and the people are cool. They're nice. They are trying to change the world a lot of times. And so that's a huge draw. And then the biggest thing that I see within the startup community is the lack of storytelling.
Okay.
So film is all about storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's probably the least likely thing that you'll have as a technical person, right? It's the ability to storytell. And so I think once you can marry those two things up together, one, that'll make it a lot easier to raise money. And then two, that's the catalyst of how you actually progress your sales and go to market and everything. Like if you're getting a client versus if you're just trying to get someone to be an employee or a partner, you got to tell them a story. They got to believe the story. And so the best way to do that is to, back to, my film days.
Yes.
It's to curate it in a way where they can understand it and relate to it.
Okay, so the thing that I think is interesting is, beyond just like startups, I think storytelling is important for like everyone in virtually every function, whether that's the sales or marketing or like, what advice would you give to maybe AI startups or people working in AI companies today, building out tools? What advice would you give them on telling their story better, on getting their message across better?
So I think first thing is that it's a person is going to make the decision, not a company. So you want to talk to a person first off. Then the most likely story period is the hero's journey. So think about your product and your company within the hero's journey. And when you think about it within the hero's journey, it's usually there's a person, they may or may not have some skill set, and then they have a regular world. And then within that regular world, something happens. There's an inciting incident. And then through that inciting incident, that pushes them into the new world. They can't go back to the old world now. And once they're pushed into the new world, then they usually got to assemble their team. Okay, great. And then once they've assembled their team, then now they go attack what it is. They usually fail at that point. Like that whole thing that I just said is exactly what a startup needs to do, right? They probably, let's say they were a subject matter expert or an engineer at a company. Hopefully you have some sort of knowledge or chops or reason to start this company up. And so you've seen a problem and you probably try to solve it within the company and it wasn't happening. Great. That was your old world and now you're looking into the new world. And so you have the capability to do it because you were at that company. And so now you've set out on this journey and you need to assemble your team. Okay, you need to go find your co-founders and you need to find your partners and your consumers. Same exact situation. So once you juxtapose them to each other, if you could tell your story in that same way, people will understand. They either know that you're trying to assemble them within your team, or you're trying to explain to them the new world that you see based off your old world. I think those are two great ways to approach storytelling. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's so powerful, and that's how, like, at the end of the day, like, when you, like, let's say for a startup, for example, when you hit someone with a giant like feature page of all the features that your company has or whatever, that's like the easiest way to lose people. Their eyes glaze over. They don't even know where to look at all your check marks of you versus them. But you're right. When you tell the story, and that's for venture capital, that's for anyone in any function really in a company, but telling the story is how I'm going to relate to that company. And then I feel like I have a connection with them. And that's essentially how the success happens. So I love that. That's amazing advice. Okay, one other thing that I want to pick your brain on for advice. I feel like a theme of kind of your story, and you kind of brought this up too, is you had some really awesome mentors, I feel like, that have kind of helped guide you, give you ideas. What advice would you give to people that are looking for mentors? Maybe they're in the journey, whether they're an investor, whether they work at a company, whether they're working in a startup or starting one. There's all sorts of, spectrum that listen to the podcast. What advice would you give them on finding a good mentor?
That's a good question. So the way I approach it is, I guess, twofold. One, I look for the top person. So if you want to be a VC, then, you probably want your mentor to be a successful GP at a venture firm. Mm-hmm. So go directly to the top. And then when you're reaching out to them, because at the end of the day, you can assume that everybody was in your, before you knew you didn't. So everybody was in your position. And some people forget where they came from, but a lot of people don't. So back to the storytelling, right? If you come at it as, I'm like you, and you probably remember when you were like me in this position, and I'm just trying to ask you for a little bit of help. And you need to stage the ask in that it's flexible enough that they can get out, or they can get a delegate to do it. And it's small enough that it's palatable to them. So if you're like, I want you to help me raise money, that's not happening.
Right.
But if you're saying, I already have all of my materials, I know that you've invested in a couple of funds, I'd like you to look at my pitch deck and give me candid feedback on that. Do you have 10 minutes in the next 2 weeks? You see how that box got so small, and they can say no, but it's like, okay, it's 10 minutes of my time. I remember when I was this person. Here's my Calendly, set it up. That, I feel like that's the best way to go about it. If you go about it from you send them either a generic message, or the ask is way too big, and this is an important person. Why ever?
Right.
Why would they ever do this for you?
Right.
So stage it so that it's a morsel of their time, a morsel of what they can do for you. It means a lot to you, but it's in a small box that they can either say yes or no to.
I love that, because I also feel like, can't remember who it was, but someone was telling me, when someone does something for you, it also endears them to you, because they feel connected. They're like, oh, like they're rooting for you, right? Like you ask them for a little favor, and it could be small. Don't go for asking a big thing of an important person. That's not going to happen. But you ask them for something small, they go and give you a little bit of advice. Now, if you come back and you're like, hey, I followed your advice, I saw this awesome success, someone just, jumped in my fund because of it, I really appreciate it. Is there any way you could connect me to X, Y, and Z person? I know, I think there's a, right? So you go for maybe a slightly bigger ask or whatever you kind of move to, but they're kind of endeared to you. And they also feel like, a sense of oh, I helped them. I did that. They're successful, but it's because I kind of helped them.
That's
you know what
guy.
I mean?
Yeah. That's my guy. Everyone wants to be able to say at the end, and they might not say it, but they know it, right? They see you up there and they're for instance, if you're the president or if you're whatever role, there was a lot of people that had to allow you to go past them. That's how life works. There's either they stand in your way, they allow you to go past, or the slight few push you up to the next, to the next level. But there is so many people that had to at least acknowledge that you can go when I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And that's super important to acknowledge, for sure. Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing advice. That's some good advice right there. Something else I'd love to ask you about. So you're obviously in the space, your fund, you have your fund. When you start looking at companies to invest in, obviously the big thing everyone's talking about for the last year has been AI and how AI is impacting. And I mean, really at this point, it's kind of funny because I feel like most companies that are AI companies, or I've seen some pretty funny companies. Oh, it's not funny, but they've rebranded to add AI into their name when it wasn't in their name before, whatever. Some hype, but some of them legitimate. When you're looking at kind of the landscape and you're looking at investing in AI companies, what are some of the things that you think are important to look at, and maybe some of the misconceptions that people have?
So I think the way that I approach investing is, first off, I have a small fund, so I have to be more founder focused, which I prefer. At the end of the day, when you think about it, in 1980, they were looking for exceptional founders. In 1999, they were looking for exceptional founders. 2008, 2020, and in 2050, they'll be looking for exceptional founders. But will they be looking for crypto or mobile or cloud or whatever? I don't know. But I know that they'll be looking for exceptional founders. So I'm going to bank on the exceptional founders for the rest of my life. And so in that, how do you gauge the person versus what they're working on? And so the way I look at it is, first off, are they leaving something that's cush and high level? Right? So is this an executive that's leaving a nice job when they don't have to? It's a pretty good sign, right?
Right.
You wouldn't put your family in that position if you didn't have some sort of inside knowledge or secret sauce. Are they working? Is the company that or the product that they're going to build adjacent or in the field that they're a subject matter expert in? That's a pretty good litmus test there. And I'll give you a pass if you're making a consumer product and you are the consumer. Then if you're dog fooding the product, and by dog fooding I mean you're basically using it every day, right? So like the Airbnb guys, they didn't have anywhere to live, so they always use Airbnb. They're either silly to not improve the product to make their lives better, or they will do that, which is how you get a better product.
Oh, I love that.
Using it. And then the last one is, obviously someone who's tried to do something in the past, and preferably they have failed, because I look at startups like, or the startup ecosystem like a labyrinth, right? And then all the founders are mice. And so if I take a mouse and I let it go through the labyrinth, there's only three options. It either gets to the middle, it gets to cheese, it dies in the middle, or somewhere, it dies in there, or it comes back out the front. Any mouse that comes back out the front is a better bet to push back into the labyrinth than to take a new mouse from the sideline. So I'm like, how many times have you gone into the labyrinth? They're like, 10. Great. You want to go in one more time? And if they're like, yes, then it's okay, perseverance. And they know at least half of the maze because they've been in it long enough to know where not to go. That's kind of how I look at startups.
I love that. Yeah. That's an amazing analogy I've not heard before, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They know, and like maybe they know even more than half the maze. Like they know so much of the maze even just because they may not have had some IPO'd company. They know all the places not to go, and your odds when you're making a bet, because it's all making a bet on them, is so much higher. That's amazing. That's some great advice there. What is your, and I guess I'm sure this plays into kind of what you explained here, but I'm just curious if there's any difference specifically with your fund. Like what is your fund specific thesis?
So my thesis is, it's pre-seed, the earliest stage. So basically first, second check-in. I'm agnostic because again, I'm not looking for a specific industry, although I do like fintech a lot because of my banking background.
Right.
And yeah, obviously AI is great, but the other thing with that, by the way, is I'm always looking at the problem that you're solving, right? You can solve any problem, and then there are tools that exist in the world like machine learning that you can apply to that problem. But before you talk to me about what tools you're using or infrastructure or setup, I want to know the problem and how heavy that problem is to solve. So that's how I look at the founders and the things that they're trying to solve. But yeah, back to the thesis. So I'm right now mainly focused on the Southwest because that's where I'm at. And being agnostic, I do believe that there are a couple of things that will come to fruition here soon, which is going to be, I think AI is going to be there, but I think there's a need for new devices that are going to collect the data so that we can then use the new AI infrastructures and platforms to do things. And those new tools are going to be listening devices and everything under the sun. And I think that those need to be built in places that are closer to us than in places like China. Right? You don't have, if it was built in Mexico, Arizona is a great place to be right next to Mexico. If it be built in Mexico, 48 hours to come up on a train. We don't have to deal with the Panama Canal anymore. We don't have to deal with the connotation of things being made in China. You don't have to deal with any of that. So I do think that that's an important piece of the thesis is, can you fit within the area that I'm in, which is the Southwest? And then will you be better able to use the infrastructure? So, here in Arizona, right, we have like Waymo. Right. Heavy Waymo. Yeah. And that's because of the laxer business friendly
Yeah.
regulations that we have here, it allows them to be able to do more testing, have more mileage here. Arizona allows that. So I'm looking for companies that would be better fit to be here in Arizona so that I can use my Rolodex to help them.
Yeah. It's just something that I think about, and I'm curious, like, first off, I think a lot of our listeners are from California. I've interviewed a lot of people from, Silicon Valley and stuff, but I do feel like there is kind of this spreading out across the country of people either working in tech, investing in tech, building in tech. And of course, I know you're kind of focused on like the Southwest, but I would be curious your opinion on like other places. Obviously, we have a massively disproportionate amount of tech being built in California, but it is a big country and we have a lot of other interesting areas. What would you say to people that are either interested in taking a job in another state, maybe out of California in tech, investing there? And yeah, I guess what's your take on like the rest of America and how that kind of plays out?
So yes, to start, yes, California is the center of the universe in terms of technology, but when you take a step back, it's not like there's something in the water that makes people in California better at technology or anything. It's that you're forced to move there. That's it. And now you're not actually forced to move there anymore with all of the prevalence of remote work. So if you're in an area and you are a subject matter expert and you believe that you can solve a problem, then I don't think that you should just rush to California just because that's where everyone states you need to go. I think you should only go there if you're looking for engineering talent and they don't want to leave there, so you have to go there. If you really are looking for like big investment, maybe you need to be there. Or if you're working in an like if you're selling to startups, it's probably good to be adjacent to YC because it's a nice little distribution channel there. But if you were drilling, right? If you were doing autonomous mine drilling, you don't need to be in California,
right?
Well, what's his name? Elon is in Vegas doing his,
right?
And there's autonomous drilling here in Arizona because we got copper mines. So from my standpoint, I would say, first off, whatever you're working on, go to the area where it's the biggest. So if you're in finance, New York would probably be pretty good. If you're in hospitality, Arizona's pretty good for that. Miami's pretty good for that. So I would say go where the industry is. And then if you're a software engineer, I don't think you should be fearful of where you live at anymore because all the tools that you need are remote. So if all the tools are remote, most of the roles are there, and you can make a lot more money, or your money will stretch a lot further in other areas. Have at it, man. There is no reason for you to be in a 550 square foot building,
right? Just
because you can be remote, you can go wherever. And I think that because people are realizing that, that's opening up America more. Because when you really think about it, right, you will build what you believe is needed for your own community. Right? That is why a company like Peloton, as if we've never seen a electric or an exercise bike before. Right. This is why Peloton is so big in California, because they personally were like, yeah, fitness. I have a small 500 square foot home, so I need a Peloton. But if you're in Arizona, right, it doesn't rain the same way because. Or if you're in Louisiana, right? There are other issues in Louisiana that you will encounter, and you will solve those problems, like, I don't know, floods and solar panels that can't be on top of roofs and stuff. Those are problems that you'll solve over there, and I think that is a good thing. If everyone moves to if all the smart minds move to California, they'll solve California problems. Keep the smart people where they're from, so they solve the problems that they know the best. That's a great.
That is absolutely like amazing advice. And I've actually, to be honest, never thought of it specifically like that way, because so like I'll say for myself with AI Box, my software startup, I've had a ton of people. I mean, I've, back when I was raising money, I would talk to investors and they'd be like, oh, you're based in Arizona, not California. Like, sorry, like we only invest in companies based in California. Like that's kind of like a big, like, problem for us or whatever. Right. And it's interesting because I 100% agree. Like, there's so many problems and there's so much like diversity of like thought when you spread out, but when you all go into one small area, you will lose that a lot of times and solve problems just for that area. So I think that's really interesting. I've had a lot of people tell me I need to move to San Francisco, and I'm like, look, it's cheap. Rent's cheap here. We're getting amazing talent. We're building cool things, great networks. So
yeah, it's, it's a 50-minute flight for you to get
exactly
to California.
Yes.
You could change your LinkedIn right now, say California.
Yeah.
People will believe it. They'll set up meetings. You set it up in a future anyways. You're like, great, I'll hop on the plane.
Yeah,
get there.
exactly.
Oh yeah, meet me at Pete's, right? Like you can do that and they wouldn't even know. They literally wouldn't even know. Yeah.
That's hilarious. And I've done that before. It's a great flight, super cheap. It's awesome. What are some of the things when we talk about AI? There's lots of hype. There's lots of interesting things with it. What is an area that you are excited for in AI that you believe is some innovation that you think is going to make a real big impact?
So I think some of the things, so for instance, let's talk about, like my favorite AI company right now that's not making LLMs would probably be Perplexity.
Oh, love them. Yeah.
Because, and I tried it out, right? So I'm like, okay, because people say you could replace Google. So I did that. So I downloaded the Perplexity app. I'm only going to ask it questions going forward. I'm not going to ask Google. And I haven't reverted back to Google yet.
How long?
It's been about 2 or 3 months now.
Holy smokes.
And I love it. Like,
that's crazy. Like, do you hear yourself right now? Like, that is insane.
And Google obviously is, it is the creme de la creme, but the only reason I'll go back to Google now is for restaurants, right? Like Perplexity is not hyper localized yet.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming it'll get there. But something like that, where it's a simple tool that it does everything that it needed to do, and it can challenge a incumbent perfectly. Those are the type of companies that I would like to look for. Now, with that being said, the better bullseye would be, what are the industries that you think could get disrupted quicker? And so I think that the industries that get disrupted the quickest would be the legacy service-based industries that have basically been overstepping their boundaries in the amount that they charge you anyways. So finance, for one.
Yeah.
So when you think about finance, there's two parts of finance. There's the service side, and then there's the technology side. And all the technology side is basically heavily regulated. You're not reinventing a Swift messaging system.
Yeah.
Or if you are, let's talk. But if you're not going after that, then you're not doing anything new.
Right.
You're not reinventing a card network. You're not reinventing KYC. All you're doing is making people feel better by the human beings that you're putting in front of them for the service portion.
Right.
And the service portion can be elevated with the AI. And so I think finance is one that will be heavily disrupted. So if you started a new bank right now, you would have less people than an old bank. And as you grow, you will still have less people than them. And then if you got to par, you would have a better P&L than them, right?
Right. Right.
Then law, right? So everyone's dealt with lawyers. I got a lot of lawyer friends and everything. Is all good, but we can all acknowledge that is very expensive, right? Most of it is templates. No matter what they want to say, it's templates. Yeah. And I really don't want to pay $7,000 for a template that I had to personally read through the whole thing to make sure that you change all the names to mine on the template. So I think they will be disrupted the most because there's a lot of alpha to be stolen. And it's a heavy service business, super legacy, and they're usually the last ones to move on technology. I think that they are ripe to be devastated by AI. The person who does it will make a lot of money, but a lot of folks will have realized that they should have been listening to the customer this whole time.
Yeah, for real. You only get away with it for so long. What advice would you give people that are looking at getting into an AI startup, actually starting one? We know not all there's hype, there's all sorts of things around AI, but like, what's some advice that you feel like can, help people out on that?
So going back to find a problem first. Yeah. So find a problem that you truly believe in, that is in a big market that people can't wait to pay for. Great. If you have that problem first, then you can attack on is there AI capabilities out there right now that are cheap enough that if we implemented them, we would be making money from it?
Yeah.
And then from there, I would say probably, I would challenge them to not immediately make the AI tool anyways.
Okay.
So before you make the AI tool, just make the SaaS tool, make the Web 2.0 situation, and then break that down from a first principles standpoint of how would I reimagine this in an AI world? Because right now I feel like a lot of it is, okay, it's basically a SaaS tool. They've added a wrapper that's going to call to whoever, Claude, GPT. And then you're basically mainly paying for the SaaS portion of it.
Right.
And then they are masquerading under that AI component for the raise. Because you didn't get any value out of it and you haven't paid them.
Right.
So you're set with you and your customer, and they're just using that AI functionality to hype up their company and go raise money. Like the things that I want to hear is I want to hear people saying, like, essentially if they say there will be tools in the future and we will use those, that's a better, in my opinion, that's a better way of thinking, right? Like if I were to say I want a new CRM. If I wanted a new CRM, then I would assume that from a first principle standpoint, let's say my phone is already listening to me anyways.
Yeah.
Give me some actionable information, right? So now the new CRM takes data from not data entry, but from voice. Takes all of that, injects it, takes your calendar, everything like that. And then it knows that you need to follow up. It knows that you need to send follow-up emails. It knows all of these. It drafts those and kicks them off for you. And you just need to say, yep, send that. Yes, I would like to meet them there. And yeah, you can save this in the CRM. In my opinion, that's how the future of work and life will look like. And you need to break your whole startup down to that level and reinvent it so that when I'm hearing it, it should sound like the future. If you tell me you're a company and I'm like, I know how to build that, Sujay could build that. That's not, I don't want to hear that. I want it to be so fantastical that the only way I could get my head around it is that I could say, well, I think the team can figure out what this guy just said to build it. That is what you should be going after in the AI world in my mind, because that's how OpenAI started. They did not know that. They didn't know they're going to have a GPT. They were a lab, and then the paper came out, and they read it, and they were like, okay, I think we could fix with this. That is a better approach, in my opinion.
I love that. That's amazing. Phillip, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, sharing your insights. I've got a bunch of new ideas that are spinning in my head from stuff you're talking about and interesting things. As we wrap up the podcast today, I would love if you have one prediction about AI in the future, something that most people might not be thinking about or people aren't prepared for, something that you do think is going to have a fundamentally big impact on the way we live or whatever. What would your big prediction for the next 3 years of AI be?
I would say a hot take, right?
Hot take.
You want a hot take? Okay, so I would say on the hot take side, in my opinion, I don't think that AI will be to the point within the next 3 to 5 years where it is going to be more creative than a human being.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is that, well, first off, the way that AI obviously works is that it's taking consensus. So from consensus, it gives you an answer. We can all acknowledge that from consensus does not come the creative things. From constraint comes creativity. Right? Like you gave me a piece of paper and a pencil. That is my constraints. And then I drew something. If you were, because people do it all the time, right? You could say, make me a pitch deck or write me a poem, right? It's not going to be, it's never good. But you could say, write me a recipe. And that's pretty straightforward because there is a little bit of creativity in that, but there's nothing really inherently creative about a recipe. So my hot take is that while AI will eat a lot of the consistent and regular business things, I think that creativity will shine in that people will find out that I would bet my whole life that you could take Sora and whatever else the names are, and it will not beat out Quentin Tarantino until he dies. That's what I was saying. That is my hot take.
I love it.
That creativity is not going to get beat out by AI. And the creative people can use them, right? Like for myself, on my free time, I still do film. So I'll write scripts and I'll go on shoots and stuff like that. And so I've tried it out myself because the first thing that people were doing with GPT was write me a screenplay of this scene. Right? And people who've never written a screenplay or seen one were like, wow, cool, because it said scene and fade in.
Yeah.
When you read through and you're like, if this was a person, they would get chopped up in a workshop in real life. If they were in a class with no problem, people would just bash that person. And so that is what I see when I'll say, hey, make me a pitch deck. It comes out and I'm like, this is not good at all. Or I'm like, make me a logo or make me an anime thing from this image. This is not good. And so that is what I believe will come from this, is that at the end of the day, the creatives will still have their domain and a lot of other things that are standardized will fall away.
I love it. That is a fantastic hot take. Hey, Phillip, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If people are interested in connecting with you, learning more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter that I can't get into.
Okay.
So tweet at it all you want. I can't answer it. And then if you really wanted to reach out to me, invest at auteur.vc. But again, I'm on LinkedIn most of the time.
Fantastic. To the listener, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll leave a link in the description and show notes to his LinkedIn and to Auteur. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.